things I see in my head, literary characters. Sabriye Tenbuken. Sabriye Tenbuken, who became blind at the age of 12, studied Tibetology at the Central Asian Sciences, Bonn University. She started the first school for the blind in Tibet, which founded Braille Without Borders, an organization that empowers blind people. In 2005, she co-founded Gandhari in Kerala. She is the author of My Path Leads to Tibet, that has been translated into 13 languages. She also starred in the award-winning documentary, Blind Sight. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Sabriye Tenbuken.
I would like to take you on a journey from Germany to Tibet and up from the Himalayas down to our beloved home, Kerala. And I want you to come with me on this journey and enjoy the sights through my eyes. I will show some films, and Paul will read a little bit of my book, My Path Leads to Tibet. Now, the topic that I was given is the things I see in my head. And that actually leads to rather absurd situations. I tell you one. When I first met Paul, my love of my life, I was quite intrigued by his voice. He has a nice voice, and he has also quite some humor. And I pictured him in my head having black hair and blue eyes. That's exactly how I prefer it. So I made pictures, and I showed these pictures to my family and friends, and they said, "Who's the blonde guy in your pictures?" And I was like scratching my head and saying, "Hey, I don't know, he must have run into my camera." And then one day I went to Holland and I showed these pictures to Paul, and I said, "Paul, you were there. Who's the blonde guy?" And he said, "That's me." I must say, my dream was shattered, because sometimes reality is worse than the things that I see in my head. But I took him anyway, so yeah. Actually, I had 3 lives. And I would like to start with my first life, my visual life, and then I would like to go over to my second life, which was life of fear and life of darkness when I became blind. And then I want to go over to the life that I have right now, which is life full of adventure. Now, starting with the first life, my visual life. I was a sighted kid, and well, when we were kids, we played this game. We loved to play this game. I see what you don't see, and this is black or green or yellow. And then the other kids, they had to look around and they had to figure out what object we actually meant. And I remember I was at the age of 9, and we played this game, and I wanted to be smart. And I said to my friends, "I see what you don't see." And I looked around in the room and I said, "And that is blue." And the kids, they tried to follow my eyes, and they said, "Ha, the lamps over there and over there." I said, maybe the carpet on the floor." "No." "What about the backpack over there?" "No." I smiled at them. Then I looked down on myself and I said, "Look at my shirt." And then the kids started to laugh. And they laughed at me and they said, "Are you blind? Your shirt is red." That ended my first life as a sighted kid, my visual life. And my second life started. And I must say it was a horrible life. 4 years of fear. I missed being sighted. I missed it so much, especially speeding on my bicycle or looking at pictures, looking at people's faces. I even missed my sighted prejudice of looking at people very quickly and say, this is a good man or this is a nice woman. All this I missed so much. And then overall, there was the fear. There was the fear of isolation, the fear of discrimination, and the fear of darkness. Because the sighted people told me it's going to be dark. You have to prepare for that. Now, I experienced isolation and discrimination in my school because the sighted kids didn't want to play with me anymore, and the teachers, they treated me like a baby. But I didn't want to experience darkness. And I tried it out once or twice in my basement, and I went around and switched off the lights, and it was horrible. I was stumbling over things, I was hurting myself. I hated darkness. I became, from a very extrovert kid, I became a very introvert kid. And my parents were really afraid and helpless. But what they did very well was they didn't jump in front of me and try to get me out of the situation. They said very clearly, you're strong enough to take yourself out of your own mess. And that was exactly the right thing to do. Now, what they did do is they read books to me. And for example, I just remember one book from Angela Davis. Angela Davis, is that known to you? Is she known to you? A philosopher, black power activist in the civil rights movement in the US. And I became very, very interested in the civil rights movement. Yes, and what fascinated me about it was that black people in America had a long, long time, a long, long history where they didn't want to identify themselves being black. They felt they're inferior, and they even felt that being black is being ugly. And I had very much the same feeling. I didn't want to identify myself with being blind, and I felt I was inferior, and I tried to avoid the situations of my blindness being obvious. Now, then in the civil rights movement, there was a turning point, a very famous turning point in the 60s, where they created the slogan of "Black is beautiful." And this was just like an electric shock for me when I heard about this. And I thought, well, if black is beautiful and blind is black, what about blind is beautiful? So that marked the end of my second life. I was about 12, and I tried to discover the beauty of blindness. Now, what is so different when you are becoming blind? Well, first of all, you are not distracted by Hollywood and Bollywood. You have to focus. You can focus. You can concentrate on the things that really matter. The second thing that I discovered was that I became much more clear and precise in my communication. And then I discovered that being a blind kid, thrown into the world of the sighted, made me actually a problem solver, because I had to figure out my own ways. And then there was one thing that was so beautiful. My imagination grew much, much stronger. And I loved to create fantasies in my head, pictures in my head. And when I figured this out, I said, okay, now blindness can come. Now I'm ready even for darkness. And the interesting thing is, darkness never came. In fact, despite the fact that I don't even see light or dark anymore, the world surrounding me became much more beautiful and colorful, because my reality was nurtured with the things I saw in my head.
This is what happened when I visited Lake Namso with Thierry. Namso is a saltwater lake 50 miles long and 25 miles wide. 15,000 feet above sea level. According to legend, Lake Namso is the vestige of the ancient Tethys Sea, which some 60 million years ago covered the entire Tibetan plain. And as with Loch Ness in Scotland, over the years, a rich web of legends and tales has been spun around Namso. In the lake's impenetrable depths, so the story goes, lives a monster that every so often lifts its nose above the surface of the blue-green waters. Intrigued by all the stories, a number of Western expeditions and team of specialists, no place on Earth today escapes the scrutiny of science, come frequently to the lake, hoping to pierce the mystery. The extraordinary colors described by everyone who has seen the lake intrigue me more, however, than the notion that a monster dwells in its watery depths. We drove all day over bumpy roads in a battered Jeep made in Beijing, when all of a sudden, after going around a rocky bend, I heard Thierry call out, "It's here, quick, quick, a camera." While he was busily taking shots of what he described as a fabulous vista, I looked outside and saw a beach of crystallized salt shimmering like snow under an evening sun at the edge of a vast body of turquoise water. Farther out, the Namso changes from turquoise to dark blue, returning to pale blue as it melts into the horizon. The setting sun was painting the surrounding mountains golden yellow, brown, and fire red. A recent downpour had frozen the mountain tops, and their peaks were covered with white powder. And down below, on the deep green mountain flanks, a few nomads were watching their yaks grazing. My face pressed against the car window. I was enjoying it all when a slight tap from Thierry brought me back to reality. "Do forgive me," he said in an amused tone. "I don't wish to sound patronizing, but if you really want to see Namso, you'd better look the other way. The lake is on the other side. What you've been staring at are rocks and a gray landscape."
So now you might ask yourself, why Tibet, for all places? I grew up with a mother who was liberated, adventurous, who traveled the world. And yes, I knew that women should travel the world all by themselves. But when I became blind, I had this feeling, who am I to have this wish? And of course, a lot of scientific people say, "Oh, no, don't travel. Don't do this crazy stuff. Don't take a risk. I mean, you're smart enough to become a lawyer and a psychologist or a psychologist, and so just stay in good old Germany and be safe." Now, the problem is that I'm not only blind, but I'm also, or first of all, I'm a rebel, and I was claiming my right to risk. And I decided to break out of the usual system, of the conventional system, and I decided to study Tibetology. During my studies, I created a Tibetan Braille system, and with this Braille system, just right before my final examination, I jumped out of university because I wanted to experience. I went with my Braille system alone to Tibet to discover the beautiful plateau, to discover adventure, and to see whether I could do something for the many, many blind people that are there because of the very high altitude. Now, I traveled around Tibet, partly on horseback, in cars and buses, with people and without. And what I met there was rather frustrating, I must say. There were families who were hiding their kids, or they were throwing their kids out to the street to beg for money, and mainly because they were ashamed to have these kids. A lot of people in Tibet believe that blindness is due to bad karma, that blind people were murderers before. So I met a lot of blind children that were not even able to say that they were blind. And then there was one kid, and this is Tenzin, now he is a grown-up man, but back then he was 8 years old, and when I came to his village, he heard about me already, and he said, well, I heard you are blind, I am blind too. And the way he said it, there was so much pride about him. And I became curious and I asked him, so Tenzin, what are you doing all day? And so he told me that he's the yak herder and he is a very responsible person. And I figured that I wanted to start a school, which is not just a school or a home where I protect the children from the difficult surrounding, from the difficult society, from discrimination and isolation. No, I wanted to create a springboard where children are able to jump back into society and say without shame and with a lot of pride, I'm blind, so what? I can do so many things. Maybe I cannot go to the next kiosk and I can buy myself a newspaper and read it right away. But I can do something that sighted people can never dream of doing. For example, reading and writing in the dark. Now, born blind people, when born blind people learn how to read, the door is already half open, but only half. Because these born blind people, they are reading about things they have never seen before. For example, colors. And a lot of our kids didn't know what colors were, and I love colors. So we try to combine, for example, colors for them with spices or with feelings. And so we said, for example, red is warm or hot and spicy, and blue is cool, and yellow is warm and silky and soft. And then these kids were able to create their own combinations, and they became very poetic. For example, one of the kids that I remember, and you will see one of the kids also very soon in the film, she said, if this is all, if blue is cool, then yogurt is blue. So curd, yeah, is blue. And the apples that we eat, and they are very, very sour, they shine silver. Now, a lot of us blind people, they tend to talk very freely and very confidently about things we have never seen before. And I would like to show you a small little film where this little girl is also part of it. And they get a present. Could you please start the first little film?
카드는 마셔도 되는 마도 돼. 카드에도 돼.
그봐.
아, 디카레. 야, 나 오늘 뭐 이거 소리다. 디지무 자디 동으로. 기란지 동거는 말 하고 싶다. 뜻이 되는 마 가도. 동어는 마 되는 마 가도. 니마. 잘했어요 말이죠.
수지요래.
뭐. 소지가 있어도 돼. 쓰드가 있을 때다.
소지 찐다.
소지 찐다.
남주